I'm really excited to introduce you to the first speaker tonight. Her name is Jess Powell. I'm going to have her come up. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Jess as she comes up. Jess, she owns a marketing company called Pink House Marketing, and we have been a client of hers, and she's been a client of ours. And she has really helped me and our group with messaging, with branding. Come on up, Jess. And through our conversations with her, we have really learned how to communicate to our target audience. So anything she says tonight, please listen to. Take it to the bank. It will make you better. I appreciate you being here, Jess.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. Awesome turnout. So as Josh mentioned, I started Pink House Marketing in Chicago about 7 years ago, and I'm quite a bit older than Josh, and he teases me about that all the time. So when Josh was sending messages to Katie in high school, I was in college, and so, you know, business, internet, I guess, kind of started around the time that I was out and working in the corporate world, and I just got really intrigued with it. I got really interested in trying to figure out, you know, how can you use the social media stuff to actually sell products or, you know, connect with people online. And so my family is kind of like serial entrepreneurs, and so I had a lot of companies that I could kind of like experiment with. One was Max's Jewelry, which is on the corner of Washington. My family owns that. And then my mom owned EYB Promotions, which was in the Rovier building. So while I was in Chicago, I was experimenting with ads and things like that. And I also had a couple of my own side businesses that I would experiment with. And one thing led to another. I ended up going out on my own and starting Pink House Marketing and started taking on more clients, started continuing to experiment, and I'm still kind of doing that today. So I'm excited to kind of share with you some things that I've learned along the way. The game has changed quite a bit. I would say, you know, when I first got online, I was helping clients figure out how to use social media marketing. It was really like, hey, just get a page, you know, just get a page, and you know, you'll be the first person to have a page, and then you can start communicating to people. And it was, you know, kind of this show up type thing. And so now I think what Josh is talking about, which is something a little bit more and deeper, is that we're seeing that, you know, you have to go beyond just showing up. You have to create and make moments with people online. So, you know, and that feels like a tall order, I think, to some people. So I want to kind of go through what I believe to be kind of the formula for doing that. And it does start with some hard work. So I hope you guys are ready to dig in a little bit. But this is kind of some of the hard work that you have to go through. So, oh, the lights just came on. Okay, so what is social media marketing? We'll start with the basics here since I'm the first one up. So Josh mentioned, it's a two-way conversation. So it's basically taking like a conversation we're having here and taking it online. So what does that mean? It means that you are human, obviously, and you're talking to other people. So how do you become more authentically human in yourself online? And sometimes that's hard. But this is the second part I want to try to focus on today about it. It is really creating moments of connection with them online. So I want to give you an example before we kind of kick this off to kind of explain what I mean a little bit more. Has anyone heard about the guy that created an ad for his crappy 1996 Honda named Greenie, and he wanted to sell it? Anyone see that? Okay, there are a ton of viewers of this, and this guy was so clever. He created this ad, and he wanted to sell his Honda Accord, 1996. It had 140,000 miles. And so he was super clever in kind of creating this video that everyone just loved, fell in love with, tons of views on YouTube. And so what CarMax did is what I feel like was super clever and genius, and they created kind of a moment with responding to this video. So let's play it.
To the guy who posted the video for the 1996 Honda Accord and his girlfriend, now fiance, I've been authorized by CarMax to make a legal and binding offer for Greenie, the aforementioned Accord. Now, CarMax doesn't play games, haggle, or pull the wool over anyone's eyes, and with our same price for everyone policy, we can't, nay won't, get into a bidding war for the car. But believe me when I tell you that your commercial has made a 1996 Honda Accord-sized hole in our heart, and we will not rest until we've filled it. So here's what we're prepared to offer. We'll buy the Accord, obviously. We'd also like to buy the cat for $5,000. We're cat people. That old passenger seat coffee pot, we want it. Let's say 35 hundo. Mexico mug, need it, $2,000. Also, your fiance's fuzzy sweatshirt jacket thing looks comfy, so let's call that another couple of cozy G's. And at the end, when she's eating the sandwich on the cliff at sunset, if there's any left over, we want that too. We'll give you $500. $400 if it has mayonnaise. That's right, we want it all. Our offer, let's round up and call it $20,000. This offer is redeemable at any of our 188 CarMax locations for the next 7 days, like all our written offers. The Mexico mug is non-negotiable. Cat's optional. At CarMax, we buy all the cars, and sometimes the jackets and sandwiches too.
So I just love that. I mean, I love sarcasm though, so I love that so much. So it was a legit deal. Like, they legitimately offered $20,000 and the people legitimately took it. So that was just such a cool moment. And I went back because I'm such a nerd, and I was like, gosh, did people actually watch this video? There was like almost 500,000 views, and it's like double more than what they normally get on any video. And it was just, Adweek picked it up, and it was so cool. So what they did, which I feel like was super smart, was they reacted to a moment, and then it wasn't like they just inserted themselves in some irrelevant conversation. It was a conversation, in which they really could be an expert. They were used car buyers. So I felt like that they capitalized on an opportunity. They used their brand voice well, and it was just super clever. So that's an example of, I feel like, a moment created online that connected with their customers and possibly prospects. So this is kind of where I feel like this is kind of the formula I'm going to take you through today, and I hope that this helps you. I'm going to kind of guide you through some steps that I take through with my clients as we kind of sort through this. So 3 things of creating moments: knowing who you are, knowing who your customers are, and then knowing your story. So the first part is knowing who you are. And I feel like, this feels very like ambiguous, like knowing who you are. I want to say, I don't know what each of you do. I don't know if you represent a brand or a company, or if you are a personal brand, but you can substitute knowing who you are for knowing who your company is in this statement. So just to make sure we're clear. So knowing who you are means kind of understanding who you are within the marketplace. So knowing how your company is different than everyone else. So that would be kind of the first piece to try to unravel. And then the second is, what is your voice? That might sound like a very marketing word to some of you. So let me break it down. So voice would be like what kind of language you use, what kind of words. How are you perceived when you speak? So some examples might be with CarMax, like they were kind of like sarcastic, and they were witty, and a little cynical, but also helpful. So that's kind of how I would translate their voice. So having time to think through this, I think, is important. And then, why are your products or services used? And that, again, these sound like, basic questions, but it's really, really important to really understand that in order to be able to connect with your customers in a real way. So let's break this down a little bit further. So questions you should ask yourself. And I was thinking about this as I was getting ready to speak, and I was thinking, this is a good conversation to have right now, because if you have time at the end of the year, this is a great way to kind of start fresh into the new year, like taking time to really think about who you are and who your customers are. So at the end of the presentation, I'll actually summarize all of these questions, so you don't have to write them all down, so you guys can download them and take them home with you, so it's kind of like a worksheet. So questions to ask yourself. What kind of tone do I want to have online? So we just kind of talked about that. Some examples, funny, serious, casual, silly, expert. That's important to understand. What are 10 to 15 words that describe your company? So things like, what describes your product? what describes who you are, your values. So I think of that as kind of like a way to have this like pool of words that you can pull on when you're creating content. And then who are you competing against? I think that's an important thing to just think about too. That way you understand, who you're competing against, and I'm going to get into more about getting intel on them. How are you different, and how do you solve your customers' problems better than your competitors? So these are some questions to really know who you are. So I'm going to give you guys some I've always wanted to be like a private investigator. Anyone else in the room think that'd be really awesome? I really do. Like one of my friends, one of her coworkers disappeared one time, and she sent me the name and was like, "Could you figure out where this person went?" And I was like, "Yes, I can. I'm on this." So this is how I'm kind of living this out in my current world. So there are some tools that you can use so that you are kind of like this private investigator online. So one thing to do to look into who your competitors are and how they're different than you, and many of you may have done this, but under Insights in your Facebook business page, there's a pages to watch area, which is if you scroll to the bottom, you can find that, and then you can add different company pages to watch in that section. And so what it does is it shows you if those companies are what they're posting and if they're getting good engagement. Because let's not reinvent the wheel. If they're posting things to your possible prospects or customers that's resonating, why wouldn't you want to check that out and maybe look at how you could do something similar? And then Google Alert. I don't know if you guys have ever set up a Google Alert, but I set up Google Alerts for all my competitors so that I get an email that tells me if there is ever any news or anything going on with them online. So am I sounding creepy yet? Are you guys creeped out? Okay, let's keep going. So there's another thing called buzzsumo.com, and you can basically just type in any kind of word, product, conversation, and it will show you who the influencers are around that keyword online, and it will show you, what some of the top content is around a keyword. So I love that when I'm doing competitive research. There is a paid side and a free side, like everything. So, but yeah, try the free first. Okay, so now we're moving on to the customer. And so there's kind of two sides to this. This is kind of like the nerdy side, like the data side, and then this is kind of like the heart, the exciting, the passionate side. So let's get through the nerd stuff first. Okay, so data. So customer-wise, here is just the rundown of what you really need to know about your customer. And it really will determine how you should be speaking to them and what kind of story you should be telling online and how you connect with them. So if you understand their age, where they're located, gender, income, their technology preferences are important, the way they like to communicate, what their generation is, what kind of family they're tied to, are they typically single, divorced, married, all of that is important. Heart. So there's, to me, the two sides. You've got the data and then the heart. And the heart is probably the most important in connecting emotionally with your customers. And that's, what are their hobbies and passions, pain points, buying seasons? All these questions are really important. And what it kind of gets you to is, and I tell my clients this often, I'm like, you sell something, you sell a service, you sell a product, you are only one piece of their life. So understanding what all the other pieces are in their life and how you can connect to those pieces better is important. So I have a client who is a shoe blogger, and she actually blogs about shoes for people that have foot issues. And so one time she posted about her dog, and it went crazy. People went nuts over it. And so what she figured out is people that have foot problems own dogs. I don't know why, but they do. So maybe they need to walk their dog. It helps with their feet. I don't know. Or maybe they walk their dog so much that their feet hurt. I don't know, guys. I just don't know. But, it was kind of something that you should take note of and notice in that, she now posts a lot about her dog, and it gets really good engagement and connects with people, and they like it. So So don't be so narrowly focused on what you sell, but think about your community as a whole and what they like to do. Okay, so here are some more tips. Okay, so we already talked about Facebook Insights a bit. So that's another place to get really good data on people that are already following your page. So if you guys, I'm sure most of you know about that, but just wanted to kind of mention it again. Facebook ads, it's not only for running ad campaigns, it's also a really great way to be like a private investigator online, because you can basically start running and look and run an ad and see how many people under certain specific criterias exist in certain location radiuses. So if you're curious if there's a market for something, you can go into Facebook and kind of start running these criteria searches to see how many thousands of people kind of hit that criteria. And Facebook has like thousands and thousands of data points to play with, so that makes a lot of sense to look that way, even if you don't buy ads. Survey. So you can always do, SurveyMonkey is a free tool you could use, and you could actually survey your existing customer base to figure out some of their either demographic information or their heart information. There's another company called Ask Your Target Market. That could be useful too, and they will do a kind of a random sampling survey based on your customer base information. Online listening, so this again is kind of in the creepy section, but not really. I mean, Radian 6 is like a listening tool, so like I told you guys, love like investigating things. If you haven't already figured this out, the internet is a brilliant place to listen. Even if you aren't on Twitter, you should just set up like some kind of searches on Hootsuite and see what's out there. You could set up searches for your competitors, for keywords. I had a moving client, and I used to set up searches for when people say, I just sold my house, or sold my house, and then I could sling those over to my client, and then they could hit them up and say, hey, we'd love to be considered to be your next mover. So it was a really easy way to kind of like find those prospects. So listening is huge, and so you can do that through Google Analytics, Radian 6. Hootsuite is another one that I've used before that is good for listening as well. Okay, so the next part, so once you figure out who you are, who your customers are, the I think most fun thing to do is to figure out what your story is, what your brand story is. So it's kind of like when the two collide. It's like the making of moments. It's when the magic happens. It's when the fire happens. It's when you know who you are, know who your customers are, and then you get to kind of make these moments. So this is the fun part. What I thought was interesting is that just kind of as I was like investigating this whole idea of stories, because when Josh approached me, he wanted me to talk about kind of the storytelling idea, that, you know, there's so much data around this that supports the idea of telling stories online and why it makes sense for us as marketers to do that. So 92% of consumers want brands to make ads that feel like a story. 60% faster is the rate in which the brain will process images in comparison to words. And then 100,500 digital words are consumed by the average U.S. citizen every day. So what does that mean? That means we need to keep it short, we need to create linear story narratives, and we need to do it visually. So if you haven't thought about video for your company, you are way behind. I think you need to consider that, and also consider how you'd use like Facebook Live features and things like that, imagery, all that, because I mean, data shows it's extremely important to do. So what are the first steps to figuring out what your story is? And I don't know if anyone here, if you're writers, if you consider yourself a writer, it's not just about writing a book. It's about telling your story visually. So some questions that might kind of prompt you to think about what your storyline might be would be, you know, why are you doing this? You know, what made you start doing this in the first place, you know? I mean, I think a lot of really great stories start from that, you know, like what made you do this? What keeps you up at night? I kind of think about, our emotions, like what gets you excited? What makes you cry, laugh? How do you relate to your customers? What are some things that you understand that they're going through? What have been some moments that have defined your life? What have been some moments that have defined your company? And then what are you excited about in the future? So what is coming up in the future that you could tell people about that you're excited about? I love this line. I did not write this. I wish I had. It's brilliant. Your customers aren't interested in your triumphs as they are with your humanity. Your customers aren't as interested in your triumphs as they are in your humanity. I botched that. So I love that. I think that's probably one of the scariest things about telling stories online is that you really do have to be true and authentic and real. And to do that, you have to show some cracks in your armor. And you have to not always have this shiny, maybe shiny surface appeal. You have to be very authentic, which means imperfect sometimes. So Sheryl Sandberg's kind of like, one of the key people that kind of founded this whole idea of authentic storytelling. So I love some of her things that she says about how you do this well. Have the courage to make it personal. If you're the owner of a business, have the courage to be a personal, brand and show who you are online. I think this is interesting too, having an overarching story you can keep referring back to. So the idea of going through this exercise and thinking about who you are, who your customers are, and then who your story is, I think is important because you don't want to be inconsistent. So really solidifying who you are and making sure that you're continuing to reference back to that. And it makes sense to people. You don't want to be, this person one day and then this person another day. You want to keep your story the same. And I think 3, I don't think we should stay away from tragedy. Maybe you started your company out of a tragedy, and that's fine. I would be prepared, and I think she's right, to use a little bit of humor. Maybe not in the story, but be sure not always be so, to make sure to balance the positive and the negative, I think is what that means. Don't be afraid to show emotion. I think Josh Burnett has done that super well with a lot of his social media marketing work, and we've had conversations. That's difficult for me to do, is to show emotion online, and so I really respect that he's been able to do that, and I think it's connected with people. Make sure your stories are relevant to your message, and that's exactly what we were talking about with CarMax. His story was very relevant to their message of being a used car company that would buy used cars. So it fit perfectly. So a couple other things just to think about is finding this intersection, which I've explained as kind of like the making of moments. Thinking about the intersections with your customers. Some other thought provokers might be like, what are your shared experiences? What are their seasonal needs? Any kind of timely and relevant reactions, solving problems, living life better, how are you relevant? Those are all important. And so this kind of gets you to the creating a plan. And so I'm about ready to wrap up here, but I feel like that it's always important to create a plan of some sort. And I do that with clients in a lot of different ways. Like we have Excel spreadsheets, we have, Word documents, but kind of slating in or creating some kind of schedule or plan, but then being flexible because you know that if you're human, you need to be reacting to real-time events, just like CarMax did. So you could slate in a few, pieces of content that will be telling your story, but then also remain flexible enough that if some big event happens, that you capitalize on it, and that it makes sense to your brand. So here are some things just to keep in mind as you create your plan. Seasonality, day and time, which Facebook Insights and would give you a whole bunch of information on the best time to post, buying habits, and then timely events, like I mentioned. And then you get to kind of pick how you tell your story. And I've mentioned a few tools. Obviously, video is huge. You can create that and then blast it across platforms, live on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, real-time stories, those are always great. Blogging's awesome. If you are posting on Facebook, just text, I would tell you I would probably not do that. Make sure that you always have like an image or something with your, at the least, with your posts, because right now people are just ignoring text stuff. So just to kind of summarize what we talked about, because we talked about a lot, and I know I threw a lot at you. We need to start by knowing who you are, and then who your customers are, and know your story, and then create a plan. So I will, like I said, kind of create, I created a downloadable form so you guys could download that and take it home and fill it out maybe at the end of the year, just to kind of, like I said, refresh and rethink about moving forward. So I hope that's helpful. Here's my contact information. If anyone would like to contact me after this, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And thank you very much for having me.